We are back with yet another session of the current review. I am a TT from Tamsanga to the TT Hookup. I am with Debza from the Unsaid podcast. We are being joined now by Mr. Shehryar Khan. He is from the Africa for Palestine. He will explain to us just now what Africa for Palestine actually is. And this discussion is being prompted by what is currently taking place in Palestine, the terrible conflict that's taking place there between the Israeli army or the Israeli government against the people of Palestine in Gaza. Mr. Khan,
yes.
Greetings.
Thanks, for hosting me.
Thank you. Could you please quickly tell us about Africa for Palestine?
Okay, Titi. We are a organization that a solidarity organization which stands obviously against specifically in this case against apartheid policies and the apartheid regime of Israel. We obviously what we'd like to do is we see ourselves as very party civil and mobilizing people on the ground and educating people on the issue of Palestine currently. That's just the basics of what we are. Obviously, where we come from, we in support of obviously the boycotts, as we take lead from how apartheid South Africa had fallen, and the methods used to give us the solution what we have right now.
I'm assuming that you would have seen the statements of the ANC during their NEC meeting, where the president and the ANC support was demonstrated through their statement, as well as their attire during the NEC meeting. Can you explain the significance of that for Africa for Palestine and the support that Palestine is enjoying from the ANC?
So from the organization, obviously, we support what the president and his team, and we welcome the statements and their support and show of resistance with the people of Palestine. Obviously, they link it very close to the heart as we come out of apartheid just 30 years ago, and we know for sure that how oppressive apartheid and what the repercussions are. And we hope for the same for the people of Palestine. Hence, South Africa has a very close connection with the people of Palestine. Also to note that how the Palestinians in our struggle had supported South Africa in overthrowing the apartheid regime. So it's an obligation which South Africa has in supporting the people of Palestine. And we welcome the attire, the symbol of resistance, the kafia, the mourning of the many lives which have been lost in this and not just in this recent times, but in the last 75 years or so, many lives of Palestinians have been lost, and Israelis. I think we mustn't forget that we treasure human life. That what brings us about is very.
Mr. Khan, quick one. In simple terms, because right now we see that there is a fight going on, and there's a person out there who doesn't understand why people are fighting, what's going on, what are they fighting for. Just in summary, can you explain what is going on, what the fight is all about, and who's fighting against who?
Thanks, Spencer. So this is not which started. This has been ongoing for a very, very long time. The closure of Gaza started long before the blockade. So in brief, Gaza is regarded as an open air prison where close to 2 million plus people live enclosed, walled off, fenced off, and controlled by a military blockade. The Israeli government even controls the amount of calories goes inside this territory. This just proves the how harsh this blockade is. It's regarded as an open air prison. They do not have access. I think 95%, 97% of Gaza's drinking water is undrinkable. To internet has been minimized just to allow just sufficient for people to survive. And obviously, with regards to this year and the military occupation, with every morning military aircrafts 4 in the morning flying over the heads of children and so forth, brings about emotion in people that for how long can they live this way? It was a matter of time where an explosion was bound to happen. And I quote something for you from Nelson Mandela, which he made mention in 1999 in visiting the Gaza Strip, that the lesson of history is that the masses of the people, the methods of political action which they use are determined by the oppressor himself. The oppressor uses peaceful means. The oppressed would never resort to violence. It is when the oppressor, in addition to his repressive policies, uses violence, that the oppressed have no alternate but to retaliate with the similar forms of action. And therefore, the pains, the blood that was spilled, responsibility lies squarely on the shoulders of the oppressive regime. Our men and women with vision choose peace rather than confrontation, except in cases where we cannot proceed, where we cannot move forward. Then if the only alternative is violence, they will support. Enclosed in a prison, the amount of calories counted, what you can consume just for you to survive, no access to drinkable water, to electricity. It's a matter of time where there's going to be an explosion, and people are going to resist this. Hence, from Africa for Palestine, we in support of the resistance of the Palestinians, the indigenous of the land of Palestine.
And how does Africa for Palestine interpret the Israeli evacuation order that demands that 1.1 million Palestinians leave their homes within a period of 24 hours? Is that evacuation order any reasonable, and would it not lead to any disaster?
I think it's catastrophic. It's a genocide. And if you look at the definition of what a genocide is, it's a deliberate killing of large amounts of people, particular nation or ethnic group, with the aim of destroying the nation or group. It's a genocide. There's no two ways about this. And hence, the international world needs to stand up and follow what recently the Colombian president have announced and have expelled the Israeli ambassador and trade with Israel. And we're hoping for, and we put pressure on our government to follow in this suit, and the rest of the international community to follow in this way as well.
Now, in terms of, I get when there's war going on, you would see United Nations coming in, like, for example, with our president standing up and actually in support. United Nations Defense Force, or what do you call those soldiers that actually defend? Is the United Nations saying anything about this situation?
So this is the hypocritical stance. There's a United Nations resolution 37 of 432, which reaffirms the legitimacy of the struggle for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial domination, apartheid, and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. This is a United Nations resolution, and themselves have found it difficult to keep this in play. In fact, Israel has went against many United Nations resolutions till date, including what we call for the two-state solution, which is at this point very debatable. But they refuse to abide by any law whatsoever. They've become a maniac regime that just does as they please. They don't have value for human life nor for law.
Why do you think the United Nations is not taking a strong stance really against the illegal occupation of Palestine by Israel?
Didi, I think it's quite clear that the United Nations is a puppet organization to the USA and the Western powers. They rushed into the Ukraine situation, placing court, and yet they have not called for the same situation, the same scenario to be taken for Benjamin Netanyahu to be taken to the International Criminal Court. It's very hypocritical, and they obviously backed by the Western powers. And let's not forget how the difference in the situation is, and the excess. I mean, we know that the US has now provided Israel with new arms. Also, Israel being a nuclear power, which in actual fact they shouldn't be worthy of being able to have nuclear weapons. We know in South Africa, apartheid, Israel had supplied nuclear arms to the apartheid government to wipe out black people. This is the type of people we're talking about.
Yeah. There are various political parties and other organizations in South Africa and the rest of Africa who are, participating in protests in support of the Palestinian struggle. Can you provide more details about the nature and scope of these protests and how they aim to, send a message to Israel?
So in South Africa, I think we've been extremely active in protest and putting pressure on the ground on our government to take a more solid and harsh or stronger stance. Let's use stronger stance in dealing with the situation. Remember, the situation has not been just for this week. It's been for the past 75 years, and it keeps being thrown under the bed, under the bus, cooled down by a lot of words and rhetoric. Hence, it's quite crucial that we come out in numbers and put as much pressure as possible to call for more solid action and more international action more than anything else. I think what's been happening is also the people on the ground in South Africa have been educating themselves quite well on the matter. And South Africans feel it because it links very closely to what struggle of South Africa was. Have a vote and allow them to all have a vote and let them decide on the way forward for themselves, just as South Africa had done. Currently, the ethnic cleansing, so the blockade on Gaza, Israelis are forcing Palestinians to leave their homeland or else face death. This is a genocide. This is their land. This is a genocide. They should have voting rights. They should have a lot more rights of freedom in their own land. And I think this is the plan of Israel. And what they gain is to minimize the amount of Palestinians on that land. Yet they know is that the Palestinians are strong at heart and they will never leave the land.
So tell me, in terms of finding peace to this situation, what steps do you believe it can be taken, especially from you as Africa for Palestine, in terms of this invasion? What steps can be taken to try and resolve or actually find a way of getting peaceful situation? Because now you mentioned issue of the Western is fueling the other guys to actually invade. Doesn't look good.
So
Yeah.
I think for us it's not. I think what we would like is for the Palestinians to have equal rights and for the people on the ground to decide a government and a way forward for themselves. Currently, they do not have an equal right. They are being extinguished from their own homeland, which is the problem at the moment, and forcefully extinguished, fueled by the Western powers at hand. I think we need to call upon the international community right now to similarly to deal with Israel how they dealt with apartheid South Africa, and boycott them in all fronts, forcing them to disarm and come to the table. Right now, they don't see any means of coming to the table and talking. So long as one side is heavily armed, there's going to be a genocide.
But what do they gain to stand to what do they stand to gain in terms of this fight?
So it's a territorial battle, in my opinion. So what had transpired in 1917, Lord Balfour from England, he had decided to give the Jews a homeland in Palestine without even consulting the people of that homeland. So he had declared that the Israelis should relocate, or the Jews should relocate to Palestine and take that as their homeland, forcefully removing the Palestinians from their homeland. My question to that is, why did he not give England as the homeland? These colonial ideologies is what the world needs to educate on and put a stop to. We see not just the British, but we see the French and the USA all have similar ideologies in colonializing, well, most of Africa and the world.
Yeah. And Africa for Palestine, you said earlier that your mission now is to, well, obviously while supporting the resistance in Palestine, but to get the rest of Africa behind the struggle for a free Palestine. Now we've got countries such as Ghana, Kenya, Morocco, and Rwanda who seem to be in support of Israel. How would you propose to change that kind of perspective coming from those particular countries in Africa?
So firstly, I think that there's a lot of work to be done on the ground. And the only way that Israel gains its support is by buying this support. Not understanding, and I think it's an education lesson to a lot of countries that they are colonizing a land, and nothing stops them from colonizing another land. So they are playing their countries at risk, but it's our duty to go out there and to educate the people on the ground and the masses. And
That's about that.
Okay, so firstly, I just like to make a disclaimer that we have nothing against Jewish people. We have a problem with the ideology of Zionism. Zionism is not Judaism. Zionism is more like a political sphere which parts of the Jewish people are familiarized with. In fact, many of my colleagues and part of our team are Jewish people, and they call for free Palestine. And just to clarify that it's not a religious battle, it's a humanitarian issue. We see that just a few days ago, Israel had bombarded and destroyed one of the oldest churches in the history of over 1,000-year-old church, which is inhumane. And we call for the stop of this type of bombings, the bombings of schools, the bombings of hospitals. This is a genocide. This is where the international community needs to stand up, because if you don't stand up, you're next. We need to put a stop to it now. It's a very big problem right now. We support the Christians of Palestine, and many of the Christians of Palestine, hence, are part of our struggle. Many of the Jews of Palestine are part of our struggle. And prior to the Jewish people being given the homeland by Lord Balfour, Christians, Jews, and Muslims all lived in peace.
And in conclusion, as the leader of Africa for Palestine, what message would you like to convey to all peace-loving people of the world?
So my message would be that as this befalls before our eyes, this genocide, we need to come out in our numbers and make a stand for justice, a stand for truth, and put a stop to this, to these bombings, this genocide, this massacre that's taking place. We know that if we don't put a stop to it, and we know that even our freedom, we're compelled to stand with the people of Palestine. And if we don't put a stop to this, we might be next. These regimes are massive. We've seen how colonialism has started. It went around the world, colonized Africa and the rest of the world, including in Asia. And if we don't put a stop to it, it will just spread. We need to put a stop to it while we can. So I'd like the people to stand together, come out in your numbers. Let's put pressure on our governments. Let's call them to take a strong, firm action on standing for the people for humanity. We want to stop. We want them to stop killing children, to stop bombing hospitals, schools. United Nations schools have been bombed. They call that terrorist camps, but it's run by the United Nations. It shows their respect for the United Nations themselves. But the only way forward is we need to put pressure on our governments to take a much more firmer stance in South Africa, as well as sending the Israelis back or shutting down the embassy of Israel in South Africa. We call for that, for immediately to take harsher and stronger steps from our government and the other countries around Africa and the rest of the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and we hope that the message echoes across, and people call for for justice and peace in Palestine. Thank you very much for the for giving us your time, and yeah, good luck with everything that's coming out.
Thank you to you and your audience. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tepsa.
Thank you.
All right, that was the current review with Mr. Shehryar Khan from Africa for Palestine. We are now moving to the next session. We will be back in a few